Thank you, Elizabeth, for your gracious introduction. It's always a pleasure to be here at the Battleground, and thanks to the Battleground staff also for all their support for this presentation this evening. And good evening to everyone here. I know y'all have had a bit of a struggle to get here, but you wouldn't be true Texans if there wasn't a struggle. I'm so happy to see all of you here. Sally Ann Schmidt and I are honored to be here with y'all tonight and share with you the history of the development of the Battleground. So please bear with us as we review the first 50 years of the San Jacinto Battleground in about an hour. So our presentation, Marshy Swamp to Shining Star, here it comes, will provide you with the history of the efforts to acquire this battleground and the improvements during the Texas Centennial that developed this marshy swamp into the magnificent battleground park that it is today. This battlefield, this sacred ground, so dear to every Texan's heart. San Jacinto, San Jacinto. The very name invokes that Texas spirit not only of the battlefield and its sacred ground, but of our Texas heritage and our Texas legacy. All of us, as members of the San Jacinto Chapter here tonight, are honored and take great pride in belonging to the chapter that bears the name of the most significant battle of the Western Hemisphere, San Jacinto. The history of the San Jacinto Battleground and the San Jacinto Chapter are so entwined for the first 50 years that it's impossible to separate the two. As we sit here this evening on this sacred ground, right on top of the heart of the battle, we are reminded of those brave and courageous men who fought here 188 years ago and were willing to give their lives for liberty and independence. You know, as Texans, we don't say, "Have you been to the battleground?" We say, "When were you last there?" Now, most of you here have all seen the movie Texas Forever, ridden the elevator to the top, been to the Texian Army camp, the boulders at Santa Anna's camp, and some of you've even read all the panels all the way around the base of the monument or driven all the way out to the Almonte boulder. But what do you really know? Do you know about how the acreage at the battleground was acquired, the location of the first monument, the Texas veterans and the legacy of the Texas veterans, the marking of key historic sites at the battleground, the story of the cornerstone for the monument, the oak trees that line Vista Road, the sundial, and the DRT panels? Now, when I give talks at our log house in Houston, I often say before you can understand about the log house, you have to know about the daughters. And before you know about the daughters, you have to know about the Texas veterans and the Texas Revolution. But with y'all here tonight, I know I'm preaching to the choir about the Texas Revolution. Most of you here are better historians than I am about the battles, skirmishes, who commanded the troops, and the strategies. But with y'all, we can just skip right over the Texas history lesson. So how did the San Jacinto Chapter in the DRT begin? And how did the San Jacinto Chapter become so involved with the battleground? Well, it started with the Texas veterans. These Texas veterans, these brave and courageous men who fought against overwhelming odds. When I look at these photos of these aging veterans, I stand in such awe of their courage and bravery. The movement to designate the San Jacinto Battleground began in 1856 when a group of Texas veterans gathered at this site and initiated a fund for the memorial monument. Then, about 30 years later, the beginnings of the San Jacinto Battleground traced to the early 1880s when the state of Texas purchased 10 acres along Buffalo Bayou in preparation for the 50th anniversary of the Texas Revolution. Can anybody tell me where the first San Jacinto monument is? Does anybody know? Has anybody been to the first San Jacinto monument? Okay, well, the first San Jacinto monument is the Brigham Monument and it is down at the Texian Army Camp. And for all of you who've been to the Texian Army Camp, you've been there and you have seen it. But the Texas veterans erected this first San Jacinto monument in 1881. It is a white marble shaft to mark the final resting place of 8 Texas soldiers killed or mortally wounded on April 21st. And on the north side, there is an inscription that was written 2 days before the battle by Sam Houston, and Houston writes, "This morning we are in preparation to meet Santa Anna. It is the only chance of saving Texas. From time to time I have looked for reinforcements in vain. We will only have about 700 men to march with besides the camp guard. We go to conquer. It is wisdom growing out of necessity to meet the enemy. Now every consideration enforces it. No previous occasion would justify it. The troops are in fine spirits, and now is the time for action. We shall use our best efforts to fight the enemy to such advantage as will ensure victory though the odds are generally against us. I leave the result in the hands of a wise God and rely upon his providence. My country will do justice to those who serve her. The rights for which we fight will be secured and Texas free. Sam Houston, remember the Alamo." And then on the south side of the monument is inscribed a letter written 2 days after the battle by Thomas J. Rusk, Secretary of War. The sun was sinking in the horizon as the battle commenced, but at the close of the conflict, the sun of liberty and independence rose in Texas, never, it is hoped, to be obscured by the clouds of despotism. We have read of deeds of chivalry and pursued with ardor the annals of war. We have contemplated with the highest emotions of sublimity the loud roaring thunder, the desolating tornado, and the withering simon of the desert, but neither of these, nor all, inspired us with emotions like those felt on this occasion. There was a general cry which pervaded the ranks, "Remember the Alamo, remember La Bahia." These words electrified all. Onward was the cry. The unerring aim and irresistible energy of the Texas Army could not be withstood. It was free men fighting against the minions of tyranny, and the result proved the inequality of such a contest. T.J. Rusk. The Texas Veterans Association officially organized an association in 1876 and began meeting annually. Now, I love this picture of the veterans meeting in Brenham at the courthouse on April 21st, 1891. This was 55 years after the Texas Revolution and 6 months before the Daughters were founded. It was apparent then that the Texas veterans were aging. So during the summer of 1891, in her father's law library located in Galveston, that is now known as the Cradle, Miss Betty Ballinger and her cousin Miss Hallie Bryan Perry, both granddaughters of a Texas patriot, William Houston Jack, who fought at the Battle of San Jacinto, conceived the idea of perpetuating forever the memory of the Texas pioneer families and soldiers of the Republic of Texas by forming an association of their descendants. The two cousins then traveled to Houston, where they met with granddaughters, daughters, and even a few wives of these Texas patriots. They met at the home of Mrs. Andrew Briscoe, herself a wife of a Texas veteran, San Jacinto veteran, Captain Andrew Briscoe, on the afternoon of November 6, 1891. At that meeting, they formed the organization that is known today as the Daughters of the Republic of Texas and elected Mrs. Anson Jones, widow of the last president of the Republic of Texas, as their president. They established the objective to perpetuate the memory and spirit of the men and women who achieved and maintained the independence of Texas. Mrs. Jones served as president for 17 years, an accomplishment that has never been surpassed. Of the 14 ladies who first met at Mrs. Briscoe's home, 8 became charter members of the San Jacinto Chapter, organizing on November 9th, 1891. As the San Jacinto Chapter in Galveston had organized on November 8th, 1891, the San Jacinto Chapter is the second oldest DRT chapter. As I told you, for my chapter, the name San Jacinto was chosen in honor of the significant battle which won independence for the new Republic of Texas. From its beginnings, the San Jacinto Chapter has held a very special interest in the San Jacinto battlefield, as one of its original purposes was to acquire and mark the battlegrounds of San Jacinto, where our republic was born. As I said before, the care and preservation of the battlefield became our objective. The history of my chapter and the San Jacinto battlefield were so entwined for the first 50 years that it's impossible to separate the two. Our annual meetings were always held in conjunction with the Texas Veterans, our father organization. At that time, in the early 1890s, the state only owned about 10 acres at the battleground. The battleground was accessible only by boat. In addition to there being no convenient landing, the nearest railway station was about 3 miles away, and there was no accessible route to the battleground. Cattle roamed as the fences were falling down. It had also become a potter's field. The cemeteries were neglected, and there was no potable water as the bayou contained salt water. In 1894, members of our San Jacinto chapter worked with the few remaining veterans to mark the key historic sites at the battlefield with iron crosses. During the 1890s, the San Jacinto chapter courted the legislatures, took them to the battlefield, and served them fried chicken dinners. As women, we know the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. The ladies wrote letters, held bazaars, and raised money to preserve the location of the battlefield. Now, when you read that history, you would need a scorecard and a spreadsheet during this time period to keep track how many times the chapter members went to the legislature and then only to be vetoed by the governor or not have enough funds appropriated. Finally, in 1891, Texas State Senator Waller Thomas Burns of Houston helped to pass legislation to fund $10,000 to establish a public park. The money was used to purchase an additional 336 acres of land at San Jacinto. However, in 1900, the San Jacinto chapter became aware of a deficit in the money needed to purchase the remaining acreage at the battlefield and put their treasury at the disposal of the San Jacinto Commission. In the early 1900s, we had to suspend our efforts for the battleground so we could assist with saving the Alamo. Once the Alamo was secured, we went back to our efforts to preserve the battleground. And then in 1904, the Texas Veterans Fund, as I said earlier, the veterans had begun a fund back in the 1850s to build a monument at San Jacinto. However, due to their increasing age, the San Jacinto chapter was made trustees of the fund in 1904 and added to the fund over the years. This original bank book is owned by the San Jacinto chapter and is on loan to the San Jacinto Museum. Once again, in the 1900s now, the ladies went back again and again to the legislature. You need that scorecard and spreadsheet once more to keep track of legislation failing to pass, governor vetoes, or funds not appropriated. The ladies sought funding to fence the battleground, that someone be placed in charge to protect the timber and prevent trespassing, to care and beautify the grounds, show proper respect to the graves of the dead, properly mark key historic sites, a driveway be made throughout the field, a flowing well be sunk, and a board of trustees be created to manage the battleground. Finally, in 1907, the state appropriated another $25,000 for improvements at the battleground and officially named it San Jacinto State Park. the first official state park in Texas. The governor appointed a local commission to manage the park and report to the State Board of Control. Now, here's a couple of postcards. The first one is entitled Cleaning the Grounds on San Jacinto Battlefield near Houston with a Spanish moss tree. Now, can't y'all just see one of us dressed up out there with horses and having our hat on or bonnet, as we clean the field? I thought that was kind of a amusing postcard. And then the second one shows the battlefield with some improvements along the bayou. So things were making progress. Now, also in 1907, these same Texas veterans who had helped locate the key battle sites were aging. So at the last meeting of the Texas Veterans Association in 1907, only 6 members answered the roll call. After the usual memorial service, each one of these men expressed that owing to the increasing infirmities of age, he would be unable to attend another meeting. They then unanimously voted for the dissolution of the organization. But before adjourning for the last time, it was resolved that the holy memories clinging around it should be merged into the patriotic association, the Daughters of the Republic of Texas. As daughters, we received an order from the faltering lips of the veterans, and the order was, carry on. Upon motion, they repaired to the Presbyterian Church, where without the furling of a banner or the strain of martial musics, these old heroes laid aside forever their badges of membership and bequeathed their memories and their deeds with an undivided Texas as a precious legacy to the daughters of the Republic of Texas, by them to be held in trust forever. We daughters were chosen by the Texas veterans, and as descendants of not only these veterans, but also our pioneer ancestors, it is sacred trust, honor, and privilege. Now, I think does everybody have a map of the battleground? Okay. When we look here at the map, this is certainly courtesy of the battleground people here. And it's a wonderful thing that they do, showing all the boulders. And on the back side, they also give a description, but we're going to go through these so everybody can see the monument and the reflection pool. So dedicated fundraising for memorializing the battleground with boulders to replace the iron markers began in 1908. The San Jacinto Chapter commissioned a battlefield souvenir spoon to be sold for $2 each to raise the necessary funds for the memorial boulders. These granite boulders came from the Llano quarries and averaged 2,000 pounds each. The boulders cost approximately $600 and were placed in 1912. There are 19 boulders on the battleground and 2 off-site boulders, Vince's Bridge and the Santa Ana Capture site. Each boulder is inscribed and has survived the past 122 years quite well, despite hurricanes, tropical storms, flooding, and subsidence. Of the 19 boulders placed at the battleground, 18 boulders are still in existence today. Only number 20, the Surrender Tree boulder, was lost during a storm in 1924. So as we look at the map here on the far left, we have the site of the Texian Army camp. And then the number 1 boulder is at the Texian Army camp. And note, the Twin Sisters Cannon, and it's the only boulder with the name of San Jacinto Chapter. But let's take a closer look at this boulder. The front of this boulder reads, Site Twin Sisters, April 20th, 1836, cannon presented by citizens of Cincinnati to Republic of Texas. Next is the back of the boulder with the original black background and raised lettering. And it reads, Number 1, San Jacinto Chapter, Daughters of the Republic of Texas, have placed these 20 boulders to illustrate the battle fought here, April 21st, 1836, which won the independence of Texas. Now, this next slide is how the boulder looks today. At the time of the Centennial and the building of the monument, it was decided to have the boulders be uniform with the panels on the monument. Hence, the black background was replaced with sandstone and the lettering engraved. And today, here is the boulder. It has replicas of the Twin Sisters cannon on either side. These cannons were dedicated on April 21st, 1974, and donated by the Brown Foundation, the Sons of the Republic of Texas, and the San Jacinto Battleground. Now, going to the next map, the other boulders at the Texian Army Camp are, we have number 2, Edward Burleson's Camp, 1st Regiment, Texas Volunteers. Number 3, Lieutenant Henry Millard's Camp. And then number 4, Colonel Mirabeau B. Lamar's Camp. Lamar was given command of the cavalry on the morning of the 21st. Number 5, Colonel Sidney Sherman's Camp, 2nd Regiment. The next group of boulders is the Texas Army Advances. Now, several of these boulders were moved during the time of the Texas Centennial from their original location when the reflecting pond was built. So first is number 6, Sherman's Advance, left wing of the infantry. Number 7 is Burleson's Advance, infantry, backbone of the Texas Army. And then we had the advance under General Rusk. Now, this boulder was obviously moved when the road was put in. And then we have Millard's Advance and Hockley's Advance with those 2 precious Twin Sisters cannons. The next map now brings us number 12 is Sherman's skirmish on the 20th, and then number 11 is the Mexican position, which you noted is in line with the monument here. Our next map, we have 13 and 15, the Mexican breastworks. Number 14, the Mexican cannon, the Golden Standard, and number 16 is Santa Anna's Camp. And then next, we have the Almonte marker, which is way down. And this is where Almonte was captured and the greatest carnage of the battle occurred. 19 is Houston wounded and horse killed under him during the battle. And then we have the 2 off-site markers, which are Vince's Bridge, and it is considered marker number 18. It's located about 7 miles from the battleground. And as this boulder was not on the battleground during the 1930s, it still has the original lettering on it. And then the Santa Anna capture site. And while both of these markers, are off-site, they are kind of considered part of the San Jacinto series. Now, the last marker is our number 20 boulder, the Surrender Tree, the original boulder, along with the oak tree, which was also lost during the storm in 1924. This boulder was replaced during the 1930s with a much larger marker. Now, everybody's familiar with the Surrender of Santa Anna painting by William Huddle. And on the front side is engraved a replica of this picture, which was erected in 1937. Now, it's a little hard to see this, but the backside reads, beneath an oak tree that grew on this site, General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, President and Dictator of the Republic of Texas, was brought a captive April 22nd, 1836, before General Sam Houston, Commander-in-Chief of the Army of Texas, who had been painfully wounded on the day previous in the Battle of San Jacinto. And then on the front, the little plaque here, it reads, in 1986, a heritage live oak was planted as a living memorial that marks the site of surrender of Mexican President Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna to Sam Houston, Commander-in-Chief, dedicated to the heroes of the Army of Texas during the Texas Sesquicentennial observance of Arbor Day, January 17, 1986. And that was erected in 1986 by the Daughters of the Republic of Texas, Sons of the Republic of Texas, and among others. And so in closing, for my part on the Marshy Swamp, I want y'all to think about these ladies. It's the early 1890s. Women did not have the right to vote. Few women worked outside the home, and fewer still were educated on a professional level. They had the vision, the foresight, the dedication. look at their legacy and what they accomplished. These ladies, wives, daughters, granddaughters of those Texas patriots fervently believe that no other state had a San Jacinto, and that is unique in the world. We are indebted to them for their perseverance for preserving San Jacinto. Thank you.
My name is Sally Ann Schmidt, and I want to thank all of you for coming today and for being interested in this topic. I did this research over 20 years ago, and I spoke on it a couple of times in the early 2000s. I also published an article on it in the San Jacinto issue of Houston History in the spring of 2007. But this was a really fun opportunity to look back at my research and to show my husband that there is in fact a reason that I've kept all of those boxes from graduate school. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, Eron, for telling about the work of the veterans, the sons and the daughters of the Republic of Texas to preserve the battlefield. Now I'm going to expand on this story into the 1930s with a focus on the monument's cornerstone. The story of the cornerstone's inscription is one of political intrigue and a cautionary lesson to anyone who underestimates the political savvy of the Daughters of the Republic of Texas. On April 21st, 1937, construction workers eased the cornerstone of the San Jacinto Monument into place. The story of how this cornerstone and the larger San Jacinto Monument were created and financed represents a fascinating confluence of three views of what the memorialization of Texas history should be. The statewide patriotic hereditary organization, the Daughters of the Republic of Texas, worked from its inception in 1891 to promote this state's history and the memory of their war heroes. Their vision for the San Jacinto battlefield, which they lobbied the state to purchase and improve since their organization's inception, is simple: perpetuating the memory of the heroes who actually fought for Texas's independence. Jesse H. Jones, seen here, Houston financier and head of the Federal Reconstruction Finance Corporation, wanted to use the 100th anniversary of Texas's victory over Mexico to create a statewide celebration of grand proportions where all Texans could enjoy and celebrate their state's great history, especially victory at a battle that Jones believed fundamentally affected the history of the United States and the world. Third, the state-level Texas Centennial Commission and its overseeing state agency, the Board of Control, worked to supervise all Centennial projects, including the Centennial Exposition in Dallas, the restoration of the Alamo and Goliad, the construction of local history monuments around the state, and the building of the Grand San Jacinto Monument, a memorial they believed would serve as a permanent reminder of the Centennial, the Texas Revolution, and the struggles of the Texians. In 1936, Texas celebrated the centennial of its victory over Mexico. Who originated the idea to host a state centennial celebration is debatable. In 1915, Governor James Hogg spoke hopefully that Texas would appropriately observe the event, and centennial clubs emerged around the state. But they died out as the First World War progressed. Most centennial literature states that the idea came at a meeting during the 10th District Convention of the Associated Advertising Clubs of America, held in early November 1923 in Corsicana. New Yorker Theodore Price gave the keynote address, What Texas has to advertise and how to advertise it. According to Centennial historian Kenneth Ragsdale, while not a Texan by birth, Price was one in spirit. An international authority on industrial and financial matters, Price appeared at Corsicana as the editor and publisher of Commerce and Finance, a weekly business newspaper. Price believed that a large celebration of Texas's history and its industrial and agricultural achievements would bring worldwide attention to the state and attract millions of visitors. Delegates to the conference passed a resolution stating that, quote, Texas should hold a great celebration at the close of the century in order that the state might properly honor the heroes of the past and simultaneously advertise the wonders of the Texas of the present and the future. Along with the Texas Press Association, the Advertising Club formed the Texas Centennial Survey Committee to explore statewide feeling for a Texas-sized Centennial Exposition event as suggested by Price. Work to organize an event suitable to celebrate 100 years of Texas freedom progressed slowly. The new Centennial Governing Board of 100 first met in January of 1925, but it was not again until April 1926 that the group selected Jesse H. Jones as the permanent chairman. 2 years later, on March 31st, 1928, Jones publicly presented his vision for a centennial at a Fort Worth Exchange Club dinner held in his honor. He stated that the state of Texas was too large for a single exposition, pointing out that Houstonians and Dallasites would not be enthusiastically attracted to an event held in each other's cities. Further, he stated frankly, the day of the World's Fair is past. Jones' vision of a centennial did include an expanded State Fair of Texas at its permanent fairgrounds in Dallas, but more importantly to Jones, it included the celebration of all of Texas's history and the statewide creation of monuments and state parks and the presentation of pageants and reenactments celebrating Texas's history. At San Jacinto, Jones envisioned a great celebration, reenactment, and pageant, in addition to the construction of a monument to the valiant Texans who fought and died there. Although Jones would become influential in the appropriation of federal funds for the Texas Centennial celebrations, he concluded his speech with his ready and anxious call to pass on the leadership of the committee. In February 1934, the Texas Legislature passed a bill originally introduced by Margie E. Neal, Texas's first female state senator, and 14 others that allowed the planning for the celebration to move significantly forward. Specifically, the bill called for the creation of a permanent Texas Centennial Commission, a Texas Centennial Advisory Board, and the holding of a large Centennial Exposition and historical celebrations to take place in San Antonio, Houston, Goliad, and other sites of importance. A year later, on April 25th, 1935, both houses of the Texas Legislature passed House Bill number 11, appropriating $3 million in funding for Texas' 100th birthday celebration. A 9-member Commission for Control for Texas Centennial celebrations, headed by the Lieutenant Governor, was created to supervise the appropriation. In addition to the $1.2 million funding for the Central Exposition in Dallas, the bill awarded $1,075,000 for centennial celebrations and expositions outside of Dallas County. Specifically, the Alamo would receive $200,000 for restoration and celebration, and $250,000 was allocated for the construction of a monument at San Jacinto. The law also provided for the Commission of Control for Texas Centennial Celebration to make a formal application for federal funds and for federal participation in the Centennial Project. On August 12, 1935, Texas's congressional delegation secured $3 million in federal funding for Texas's Centennial. The appropriations bill also created the United States Texas Centennial Commission to control the federal money. Texas now had the money to create a Texas-sized commemoration, but the question of how to spend it remained unanswered. Those in charge of the exposition in Dallas asked the commission for $2 million of the $3 million from the federal government. Dallas always wants all the money. Jesse Jones, a man dedicated to the memorialization of Texas history and not the commercialization of the Centennial, made a speech to the U.S. Centennial Commission before the commission finalized its allocation decision. In what Houston Chamber of Commerce member W.N. Blanton labeled the strongest presentation of the case for San Jacinto that I have ever heard, Jones called for both the Alamo and San Jacinto to receive $1 million each for restoration and construction. Jones brought the commission's attention to the debt the people of Texas and the larger nation owed to the Texans who were massacred at the Alamo and Goliad, and who won at San Jacinto. He stated, "And how shall we commemorate them? By suitable markings and monuments and memorials at these sacred places? Or shall it be by a little bigger show, a little more carnival, something that will die with the passing of the exposition? Another building to be torn down, another department added, more money spent to have a big time, none of it which will have any serious or direct connection with the sacred events we are to memorialize." Jones continued about the purpose of the Centennial and the problems of a commercialized exposition that did almost nothing to permanently recognize the efforts of the courageous soldiers fighting for Texas independence. He also said, "The Speaker for the Fair Corporation made the statement Friday before your commission in this room that Texas had appropriated $250,000 for the commemoration of the Battle of San Jacinto, and that this had paid Texas's debt to San Jacinto. This I deny. Texas's debt to San Jacinto cannot be paid." Jones concluded, "To me, it will be little less than a sacrilege to spend this money for strictly exposition or commercial purposes, desirable as they are, throwing a crumb or a white chip to the blood-tainted shrines that made Texas great: San Jacinto, the Alamo, and Goliad." The same day Jones made his plea, the U.S. Texas Centennial Commission announced its allocation. The Dallas Exposition would receive $1.2 million, with San Jacinto and the Alamo each receiving $400,000. Goliad would receive only $50,000. Although Houstonians such as Houston Chamber of Commerce President Gus S. Wortham and H.O. Clark Jr., chairman of the Houston Centennial Subcommittee, expressed public excitement over the amount, Jesse Jones was disappointed in the outcome and what he considered the wasting of $1.2 million federal dollars on Dallas's commercial Centennial Exposition. Nevertheless, the State Commission of Control for Texas Centennial celebrations progressed with its lofty plans for San Jacinto. The commission planned to apply for a Public Works Administration grant of at least $350,000 in order to allow for $1 million for construction of the monument. But at Jones' urging, the State Commission amended its application to ask the PWA to provide an additional 45% of the $650,000 state and federal funds already awarded. The next February, the state PWA awarded what the commission asked for. In addition to state, federal, and PWA funding, the Houston Ship Channel Commission donated $40,000 for the effort at San Jacinto. By the time of the announcement of the allocation of $3 million in federal funds on August 17, 1935, preliminary drawings for a memorial complex with a central rotunda with two wings, one to serve as an auditorium and the other as a battleground museum, along with an outdoor amphitheater, have been drawn by architect Alfred C. Finn. Jesse Jones recommended Finn for the San Jacinto project, and Finn was officially named as the head San Jacinto architect on August 26, 1935. Finn, likely because of his very close association with Jones, was named without a traditional design competition. But the State Board of Control instructed him that plans for the monument needed the approval of two associate architects, John Dennert and Maurice Sullivan. Finn and Jones had worked closely on the design and construction of Jones's Rice and Lamar hotels and the Art Deco Gulf building. Both men admired the other's work. Although Finn was the official architect, he took his inspiration for the present monument from Jesse Jones. Jones's biographer, Baskin M. Timmons, states that, quote, Jones himself drew the plans for this monument, the shaft surmounted by the star on the top indicating the Lone Star State, comparable in height to the Washington Monument, and resting on a two-story and basement base of 200 feet square, comparable to the Lincoln Memorial. Finn himself stated that Jones gave him a, quote, crude sketch of a tower with a star on top. And in an interview with Finn's son, Alfred C. Finn Jr., in 1978, the younger Finn stated that the monument and its design were really Jones's idea, and that is unfortunate that Jones's name is not on it, since he was involved in almost every aspect of its construction. On April 21st, 1936, despite, on April 21st, 1936, despite rain and several thousand spectators attended the elaborate program at the battlefield. The day-long celebration began with the flag-raising ceremony, followed by a Catholic military mass honoring the heroes of San Jacinto. The patriotic program, sponsored by the sons and daughters of the Republic of Texas, began at 2:30 and featured an address by Governor James Allred, as well as the annual reading of Sam Houston's official report of the battle. They also broke ground on the monument. You can see there a picture of that. In the months following San Jacinto Day, 1936, Finn and the Board of Control continued to make progress on the battle monument. The Board of Control approved Finn's plans on April 25th, and they subsequently authorized him to advertise for bids for construction companies. On June 4th, the Board of Control approved Finn's recommendation that the Bellows Construction Company be awarded the contract. Their bid of $758,300 was the lowest of the 7 competing companies, and construction began in earnest on the project shortly after the decision. Here you can see, this is from September of 36, and you can see them starting work. And then this slide is from March of 37, shortly before the cornerstone ceremony. So this is what it looked like at the time of the cornerstone ceremony. Jesse Jones, always the man with control and power, financial or otherwise, corresponded with Finn throughout the monument's construction and received each version of the cornerstone inscriptions. The cornerstone itself was to be one piece with 2 faces, 3 feet by 4 feet 6 inches of buff Cassoda vine marble in a honed finish to match the stone used in the building. In the first version of the inscription, dated March 18th, 1937, the left-hand side of the cornerstone was to blaze in 3-inch high, incised Roman letters, San Jacinto. Underneath was a Texas star surrounded by a branch of live oak leaves to the left and a branch of olive leaves to the right, with erected in AD 1936 on surrounding the star and the branches. In 1 and 1/4 inch high letters, it would read, "This cornerstone leveled by the Honorable Jesse Holman Jones for the state of Texas." The right half of the cornerstone would be a listing of prominent state and federal officials, the names 1 1/4 inch high, and their positions 3/4 of an inch high. It also read, "Erected by the state of Texas with funds appropriated by the federal government and the state of Texas to commemorate 100 years of Texas independence." At Jones' urging, Finn changed the list approximately 1 week later. He added the lieutenant governor, and he changed the text to read, "Erected by the federal government and the state of Texas, dedicated to the heroes in the Battle of San Jacinto, whose deeds won for Texas liberty and independence, April 21, 1836. On April 5th, 1937, the State Board of Control sent a letter to Finn approving this inscription and authorizing the lettering of the stone. As per PWA regulations, Finn and the State Board of Control also submitted the final inscription plans to the PWA State Director in Fort Worth. State Director Julian Montgomery wrote to Finn April 5th with the PWA's concern that the inscription fails to list any PWA participation in the project. Finn replied that the State Board had spent some time deciding upon the names and inscription and had even eliminating his name, leaving only the actual governing bodies. Finn also stated that he had requested to the Board of Control that the state director's name be mentioned in a reference to the Public Works Administration, but later advised Montgomery that although the State Board of Control would continue with the planned inscription, leaving out the PWA, it would place a bronze tablet crediting the PWA inside the monument. On April 6th, the next day, 1937, Finn inspected the marble cornerstone in the yards of the South Texas Stone Company, and he authorized the carving. The cornerstone was to be laid on San Jacinto Day, 1937, a celebration the Daughters of the Republic of Texas had traditionally controlled. At the San Jacinto Chapter's monthly meeting on April 1st, 3 weeks before the gala, the women detailed their plans for the cornerstone ceremony. They had high expectations for the 101st anniversary, but because of the construction and the significance of the cornerstone placement, they recognized that they would not have exclusive control of the festivities. While the San Jacinto Chapter would have their traditional afternoon program featuring the reading of Sam Houston's report, the awarding of essay contest prizes, and a speaker of their choice, the higher profile events, speeches by Governor James Allred and Jesse Jones, and the placing of the cornerstone would occur during the morning program. Nevertheless, the daughters continued to assert their authority by asking for a place on the morning program, and also recommending that Jones include information provided by them in his speech pertaining to the influential role of the DRT in the purchase of the battleground. The San Jacinto Chapter had worked tirelessly for the battlefield in the past, and because of their successful efforts, they assumed a sense of ownership over it, a feeling that remains strong today. The women believed that they should have a say in what happened to the battleground and to the new monument. They wanted permission to review the inscription on the cornerstone prior to any final decision. Mrs. Carrie Kemp, acting president of the statewide organization and a member of the San Jacinto Chapter, sent a telegram to Claude Tier, chairman of the State Board of Control, that read, "The Daughters of the Republic of Texas ask that they be given the privilege of reviewing the inscription to be placed on the San Jacinto monument before any final decision is made." The board approved Kemp's request and forwarded Finn's plans to the chapter. Kemp and Madge W. Hearn, president of the San Jacinto Chapter and a granddaughter of Sam Houston, reviewed the plans in the first few days of April. Upon reading the inscription, they notified the president of the Sons of the Republic of Texas, Kenneth Kroll, and the three leaders telegraphed here on April 7th. They protested that the cornerstone would recognize living men and proclaim their names in prominent letters on the cornerstone and not honor the memory of those who had won independence for Texas. The group also telegraphed Governor Allred and the President of the United States with their disapproval. It was Allred's first notice that the cornerstone would name him, and he immediately sent a letter to the Board of Control asking that his name be removed. Shortly before noon on April 7th, Lieutenant Governor Walter Woodall and the Texas Speaker of the House, Coke Stevenson, also submitted requests to the board that their names be removed from the inscription as well. Despite receiving the telegrams of protest from the sons and daughters in Houston and the letters from Allred, Woodall, and Stevenson, Tier and Board of Control member John Wallace said that the cornerstone inscriptions would continue as planned. Both men stressed that the cornerstone was only a small part of the monument and that the names of the heroes would be engraved in large letters at the entrance to the building. Furthermore, the two reminded the public that engraving the names of those connected to the project in the cornerstone of a federal or state building was common practice. Hearn, Kemp, and Kroll called an emergency joint meeting of their groups at the San Jacinto Chapter's meeting house, the Log Cabin, in Houston's Herman Park, for the evening of Wednesday, April 7th. Sons President Kenneth Kroll chaired the meeting that was announced publicly in both the Houston Chronicle and the Houston Post. Joined by members of the local United Spanish War Veterans Camp, members expressed their disgust with the Board of Control and Alfred Finn's decision to place the names of living persons on the memorial. One person noted that the San Jacinto State Park Commission, with the sons and the daughters, had suggested an alternative inscription at the end of March that stressed the mystery of the Texian heroes and also mentioned Daughters of the Republic of Texas, Sons of the Republic of Texas, and Patriotic Friends. You can read it here. At the meeting, Krall revisited this proposal, saying he did not see any reason for the sons and daughters to be listed on the cornerstone, and the group concurred. Those who attended the meeting agreed to support the inscription favored by the Spanish war veterans. Erected by the United States of America, the state of Texas, centennial tribute to the patriotism, sacrifice, and valor of the men who here fought the Battle of San Jacinto under General Sam Houston, April 21st, 1836. The group also adopted a resolution that stated their desire that no living person's names be placed on the monument. Carrie Kemp, state president of the Daughters, said that although state and federal officials listed on the cornerstone plans worked to secure funds for the memorial, she urged, let this memorial take a broader, deeper message to future generations. In opposition to Mrs. Kemp, Mrs. Eugene Harris, officer of the Houston Daughters of the American Revolution, recalled for her group her conversations with Claude Tier and Alfred Finn, saying that Tier viewed their present attitude as unfair and improper. Harris repeated Tier's offer that a committee composed of 3 or 5, quote, unprejudiced and undesigning, end quote, individuals go to Austin and meet with him to discuss the cornerstone. She also spoke of a conversation with Finn in which he said that the placing of selected names on the cornerstone was usual practice and could be viewed the same as an artist's signature. Furthermore, according to Finn, the cornerstone would be a relatively insignificant part of the monument, located in a back corner of the site, not on the front area that most visitors would see. If you've ever seen the cornerstone, you know it is in the back. Judge John M. Moore, president of the State Sons of the Republic of Texas, disagreed. He said that the San Jacinto monument was special. Quote, if it were part of a federal, city, or state building, it would be different. But when it comes to a monument of this kind, I don't think even any living man should have his name on it. If anyone's name should go on it, why not start at the top and put the name of every taxpayer in the United States? End quote. To the men and women meeting at the log cabin, the San Jacinto Monument would not just be any federal or state project. It would not even be just another centennial monument. This was the memorial that embodied the respect Texas held for the sacrifices of its heroes, and they thought nothing should obscure that fact. The group selected Madge Hearn, Kenneth Krall, John M. Moore, State San Jacinto Park Commissioner W.E. Kendall, Spanish-American War veteran Guy McLaughlin, and Houston Mayor R.H. Fonville to travel to Austin with Sterling and Kemp to meet with the Board of Control the following day, Thursday, April 8th. Remember, San Jacinto Day is only 2 weeks away. 2 hours into the committee's discussion with Tier and other board members, a messenger from the Capitol interrupted the conference. The controversy over the cornerstone had been resolved with the passage of legislation forbidding the names of the living on centennial monuments or buildings. In the morning session of April 8th, Senator T.J. Holbrook of Galveston proposed Senate Concurrent Resolution number 54, a bill that called for ending the practice of inscribing names of living persons on memorials and buildings dedicated to celebrating the centennial, and, quote, paying tribute to those deserving statesmen, citizens, and soldiers who have passed to the great beyond, and whose memory ought to be cherished and kept alive as an inspiration to those generations who come after us, end quote. In addition, Holbrook's bill provided for the removal of names from buildings and memorials already complete. So they wanted to scrape the names off of things that were already up. The resolution passed by a vote of 22-5, with one senator abstaining. The House of Representatives amended SCR number 54, removing the clause calling for the removal of the names already inscribed in existing centennial structures. The Senate acquiesced, and the Speaker of the House and President of the Senate signed the resolution that same day. The Board of Control responded to the resolution with frustration and uncertainty as to whether a new inscription could be decided upon and made ready for the ceremony. San Jacinto Day was less than 2 weeks away. Tyr said the entire controversy, quote, seemed to be a lot of trouble over a very small thing, end quote. Again, he reasserted that including the names of federal and state officials involved with the project was standard procedure. But the board had no choice but to obey the new law. The State Board of Control did make plans for a suitable bronze tablet in the interior of the monument, giving credit to those initially named on the cornerstone and the PWA. Madge Hearn said to the Houston Post regarding the controversy, all this trouble could have been avoided if Mr. A.C. Finn, architect of the monument, had treated us with the consideration to which we thought we were entitled. He treated us like children. The members were not children, and they held power that the Board of Control and Alfred Finn did not fully realize. In light of the last-minute legislation, Tyr invited the daughters to propose a substitute inscription to Lou Kemp, husband of Carrie Kemp, and chairman of the Historical Advisory Board of the Centennial Commission, who would then recommend a final inscription to the Board of Control for approval. Lou Kemp met with Carrie Kemp, John Moore, Hearn, Kroll, and W.E. Kendall, and J. Perry Moore, chairman of the San Jacinto State Park Commission, on Monday, April 12th, to draft the new cornerstone inscription. After a 4-hour meeting, the group came up with erected by the United States of America and the state of Texas, A.D. 1936, dedicated to the heroes of the Battle of San Jacinto and all others whose deeds won for Texas liberty and independence, April 21, A.D. 1836. The board approved the inscription, and Finn placed it on the right side of the cornerstone in 1.5-inch incised Roman letters. The left side read simply San Jacinto in 4-inch incised Roman letters above an incised Star of Texas surrounded with a branch of live oak leaves to the left and a branch of olive leaves to the right. The daughters had won their battle, and only names of Texas's heroes would be mentioned. On the morning of April 21st, 1937, Jesse Jones dedicated the cornerstone. In his speech to several thousand spectators, he stressed the importance of victory at San Jacinto to the United States and to the world. He also applauded the state for finally building a monument to honor the deeds of the Texans who fought for independence. Following the speech, historical documents selected by the daughters were sealed behind the cornerstone, and members of the DRT, each holding a small Texas flag, filed by the cornerstone, followed by members of the Sons of the Republic of Texas. The patriotic group sponsored their own program that afternoon, in which they honored the deeds of the Texans during the Texas Revolution and at San Jacinto. Here's a picture of Jesse Jones, cementing the cornerstone into place. You'll notice that the star is not on the cornerstone because they did, in fact, not have time to finish the cornerstone in time for the ceremony. The Bellows Construction Company and Alfred Finn completed the San Jacinto Monument in the first quarter of 1939, in time for its official dedication on San Jacinto Day. You can see it at different stages of construction. And here we have San Jacinto Day, 1939. Upon completion, it was the tallest stone monument in the world, towering 550 feet above ground. It serves as a reminder of the unique history of Texas and the sacrifices of the veterans of San Jacinto to those Texans and non-Texans who visit the site. Although the Daughters of the Republic of Texas did not donate money for the construction of this memorial, Without their years of dedicated work for the acquisition and preservation of the battlefield, the monument would not have been possible. Now, you may remember from Eron's presentation that in 1904, the San Jacinto Chapter of the DRT was made trustee of the Texas Veterans Association Memorial Fund, which at the time it totaled $1,501.20. You saw the check. The daughters had continued to add to this fund, called the Lubbock Fund, and by the 1930s, they had approximately $5,000 in it, and that had been raised to erect a monument to honor the Texians who died at San Jacinto. In December 1937, the San Jacinto Chapter voted at the regular monthly meeting to erect a sundial monument with the Lubbock funds. The women commissioned Houston painter and sculptor Julian Rhodes Mensch to create a large bronze sundial to honor the 9 men who died in the Battle of San Jacinto. In 1939, the sundial was erected on a granite pedestal in the center of the Great Stone Circle at the Texian camp, which was built by the PWA. And at the time, it was the largest accurate sundial in the world, measuring 25 feet in circumference. The sundial was officially dedicated by the daughters on San Jacinto Day, 1940. If you visit the sundial today, you'll also notice on the north side of the Great Stone Circle 3 stone panels erected in 1940-41 that permanently commemorate the important work of the Daughters of the Republic of Texas at San Jacinto. The panels were put up by the PWA in cooperation with the San Jacinto Park Board and the State Board of Control. They read, "The movement to set apart San Jacinto Battleground as a patriotic shrine was begun in 1856, when a group of Texas veterans assembled here started a fund for a monument to the 9 men who fell in the battle. In 1883, the state purchased the first 10 acres. The second panel reads, "From its organization in 1891, the Daughters of the Republic of Texas became leaders in this work. They assisted in establishing the boundaries of the battlefield, placing granite boulders on significant sites, and induced the state legislature to appropriate money for buying and improving the land." The third panel, in 1936, the state and nation began the erection of the memorial shaft to honor all Texas heroes. In 1939, San Jacinto Chapter, Daughters of the Republic of Texas, acting as trustees for the Texas veterans, erected the sundial, thus completing the work begun 86 years before. The Battle of San Jacinto lasted only 18 minutes, yet the fight to control how it was to be permanently memorialized lasted years. I would argue that it's still ongoing. The events that led to the construction of the San Jacinto Monument and the laying of the cornerstone illustrate that who prevails in the end is often who is most persistent. At critical junctures, the daughters realized their vision of the battlefield through organizational persistence. In the end, the grand and imposing San Jacinto Monument and the battleground itself is a memorial not only to Sam Houston and his troops, but also to the vision, persistence, and political insight of the groups and individuals who fought for the preservation of the battlefield and the construction and financing of this monument. So thank you. I hope you'll go look at the cornerstone when it's light outside.